1950 in Israel. Israel was just 2 years of an independent state. My parents are both from different countries, Holocaust survivors. Their story is a very different one. My mum came from Czechoslovakia to a very, very from shtetl family. My dad came from Poland. He was actually from a city in Poland, a large city, and they were a very Zionistic family. So that's my parents. And also, as Hillary knows, and maybe other people know, my parents attempted to arrive in Israel on the Exodus. My mum was pregnant with my brother. And sorry, my phone's... My mum was pregnant with my brother, and he ended up actually being born in Germany, because unlike the story in the book, the ship actually ended up, or the stories, they ended up back in Germany under British rule, and then they were staying at displaced people's camp. So he was born in Germany, and actually until today, he hasn't actually got a birth certificate. And Malcolm and I were going to join him and his wife in May this month. Last week, actually, we were going to go to a town in Germany, still trying to search for his birth certificate. But that's the family, and that's my brother. When I was born, we were already living in Israel, in Jaffa. My parents were given a house to live. It was an apartment, actually, not a house, but it was in Jaffa, belonging obviously previously to Arab people who fled during the Independence War. Very, very typical Arabic house. Lots of patented flooring and glass, lots of color. Very nice house, flat. It was by the beach as well, literally, a stone throw away from the beach, which was great in the summer. In the winter, it was worse, really bad, because damp was everywhere. My grandparents lived with us as well. My father's parents actually survived. That's another story. Survived, and they lived with us as well. So we were there. And my grandmother passed away 53, something like that. At which time my grandfather moved to his daughter, who lived on kibbutz. Had a very happy childhood. I think again, Holocaust people actually survived the Holocaust. My mum didn't have her parents. My mum lost both her mum and dad and a younger sister in Auschwitz. So they really were very, very protective over us, very, very loving in a way of that people say, we have to be parents, grandparents, and just, wanting everything for their children, even though money was very, very, very tight. My father was doing more than one job to keep us. Anyway, we moved away from Jaffa because of the damp. When I was 7 years of age, and we moved to a place called Ramat Gan, which people would know. Then I went to a new school and had to make a new life. When we moved in, it was where we lived, which obviously the building is still there. It was all new build. Around us were orange groves around us, but they were started taking over orange groves to build properties for people in Israel. When we moved in, we still didn't have electricity or anything else, because they promised there will be, and there wasn't. I remember that. Again, many, many happy years there. I don't remember much the Sinai War. I was too young. So going to school was, Zionism was the biggest thing, songs and learning. And at school, though, we actually, I went to an irreligious school, but all schools were teaching the Torah, the Tanakh. We even had a Gemara teacher. I'm not even sure they do that anymore now. We all learned, obviously, that was part of our history. So we learned then, so the Chagim, and learning languages. We're learning English and French. Not that I was any good in either of them. And it's only since I met Malcolm that my language improved. Anyway, so it was very euphoric, you know, in as much as we were a new country, and we were all sort of in the same boat, sort of thing. Children at school, most of them also, you know, if they came from Europe, most of them didn't have grandparents, and that's how we were growing up. My brother was 2.5 years older than me. So we ended up, as I was growing up, we ended up that my friends and his friends, you know, his friends wanted to meet me and my friends. So we became a nice group of friends. Friday night was the time to go out. So we all of us had the same sort of life, unless they were from. We obviously all ate kosher, but Friday night was the night that we ate Friday night dinner quite early and then went out. And mostly met up, you know, in the street. There was no clubs as such, and then started later on, we had discotheques. So we did go to discotheques, and we did try, you know, that this is me and my way of movement. There was other friends of mine who were extremely strict with a new way of life, which disapproved of this frivolity of going dancing and everything else. They were just going to you know, youth clubs and learning, you know, how to live in tents and how to do all of that. I was the one who actually loved, you know, doing the normal worldly teenager things. And we were all obviously were due to go in the army at the age of 18, boys and girls. So that was part of life. My brother went to the army. He became a paratrooper. And again, a very Jewish army. Parents were invited to passing up parades, and the first time that they jumped out of their airplane, we were all there greeting them when they came out. And that was also extremely unique. Extremely unique. By the way, it still is like that. The army is looked after by the whole country, in as much as, you know, they always involve the families wherever they can, because they are boys, you know, they are boys and girls. Anyway, 6-Day War. I'm now 1967. I'm 17 years of age, and the 6-Day War happened again. We were all at home. That was quite horrific. The whole lead up to it. I was obviously a teenager, but very involved through school, or high school, about it. And my brother was actually in the army. I remember absolutely distintly the day that you know, that they went to he went in the army. He went away. He was in the army, and all of this, the fighting and all the reporting that were done, and sirens, and going into the shelter with the neighbors. We lived in an apartment block, so we had in the basement was a shelter. I remember that distinctly. Anyway, as we all know the story, you know, an amazing euphoric victory. Couldn't be any happier with what the results were. And the only thing was, at the time, that, you know, there was so much more land that was taken aback, Jerusalem and in Gaza and all around, and in Syria, that by that time it was summer, end of school. School finishes June the 30th. And the government decided that they didn't want kids being on holidays just yet, because they needed to sort all other things out first. They felt it would have been a bit dangerous for the children to just be running around freely out of school. They prefer that they'll be back at school, still at school. And they extended the school year by another 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember how long, just so that parents, they needed the people to go back to work, and, there was a lot of fruit and stuff to pick, and because the men were in the army. Anyway, we at obviously we were in high school, 17 years of age. We only had 1 more year of studies, and we all screamed blue murder. All our exams were finished. We want to help as well, the country, to help get on with it. We don't want to just be at school learning for another 2-3 weeks. So they accepted it, and they sent the whole school, the older children, the 17 and 18-year-old, to different kibbutzim to help with picking up the fruits and picking the fruits and the vegetables and anything that was needed, because they were very, very short of manpower, because, as I say, the guys were still all in the army. So I ended up in a kibbutz with all my friends and my classmates, and the person that you know as my husband Malcolm, who also decided to go flying in Israel. That's his story. He volunteered against his parents. His mother particularly was absolutely distraught that he was going, but he actually again came. The war was over. And again, what they needed, the volunteers, was to do the picking. And we ended up in the same kibbutz. And that's how Malcolm and I met. And, we are now 50 years married. And that's that side of it. Now, before that, obviously, Malcolm also went back to England because he promised his mum that he will go back, whatever happens. And I did, I had another year at school, and I was going in the army. So I did go into the army at 18. I think I went actually in October, so I was just older than 18. I did my basic training, then allocated where I was going to work, and I was actually just at the time, women were not in combat units at all. And I was in a base quite close to home. Most nights I used to come home, and I was just a PA to high-ranking the head of the Shirion. Malcolm, how do you say Shirion? The artillery division. And that was very interesting. However, in the meantime, Malcolm and I got engaged, and married women are exempt from continuing their service or going in the army. So I only did 10 months where I should have been doing 2 years. And so now we are now in 1969. And we decided neither of our sets of parents could help us out in any way financially. So, and Malcolm thought that he would be able to find work and do better to save money in England. So Malcolm and I went on a temporary basis to live in England to save money. We lived with his parents, and we went with that, and we actually did exactly that. 2 years, saved money for a deposit on a flat, and then came back to Israel. Malcolm made Aliyah as such, and I came back. We purchased an apartment in a place called Rishon LeZion, and that's basically, then we are just a married couple, and then Eyal was born 1972, and Amir was born 1974. Before Amir was born, and Malcolm's jobs were, it was okay, but nothing terrific. And I was also going to work, but that's the norm in Israel. Absolutely all the years since I was all wives, they had to. I know it's more or less the same now in the UK, but it wasn't so when I came here. You know, it's just like it's always the both couple working, and they're finding childcare arrangement for the children. Anyway, I went back to work straight away. 3 months after 3 months, straight back to work, and we have every intention of staying and living in Israel. Then one day, again, all the family in England, there was a bar mitzvah of Malcolm's brother's son, and we came back to England. I was pregnant with Amir, and came to England for a visit. At which point, Malcolm was met with somebody, member of a family. I won't go into that at all. Who offered him an offer that he felt he cannot refuse. It will be amazing. I won't have to work. I will have, be all great and fun, wonderful. And he decided that we should come to England, or we decided, I should say. It was very, very hard decision to make. And he needed to go off almost straight away. We're talking now, it is 1974. I'm 22 years of age, pregnant with Amir, and Malcolm went off to start finding us, to resettle in the UK. And I am having to tell my parents that we are leaving at the time, going to live in England. No idea about when we're coming back. My mum took it really badly. And in fact, I keep saying now that she's sitting up there smirking at me because I now have a son who lives in Australia. And so we did. So I ended up in Israel having to sell the apartment, sell the furniture, do everything myself. And I keep, and I didn't think anything of it, girls. I really, that for me, that was like a normal thing. It's just now thinking about it and seeing, my children and everybody at the age of 22, my God, married. Oh, and obviously I also said that to Malcolm, I'm not having the baby in England. I'm going to first have the baby and get the baby to be a few months old before we come back, which was exactly what we did. So I'm coming now to 1974, which is when Amir was born in July. Malcolm came over, obviously, when he was told eventually, because he always remembers that my father forgot to phone him up, that he forgot to phone Malcolm to say that he's got another son. And so we came to England. And Amir was born in the July, and we came to England, the UK, in the October. And I had to settle now. By that time, it took a while before we found, Malcolm's parents lived in Hackney. His brother lives in Chigwell and his sister in Hendon. And we were looking around for all sorts of places depending on what we could afford, and ended up here in Monkswood Garden, where we still live. And I had to find new friends, a new way of life. But, I was welcomed by the family. I was welcomed by my friend Maureen, who lives across the road, who used to hear this woman screaming at her children in Ivrit. And we are absolutely firm friends since then. And it's a very different life. And obviously my home, my parents' home, Israel was always a home. But now, for many years now, I'm longer in the UK than I've been living in Israel, because I was, as I say, 22 when, 24 by that time, 22 when Eyal was, when I was 24. And I'm now 69, going to be 70 in a couple of weeks' time. And, life's been great, ups and downs like everybody else. So I don't know if you have any questions, but this is me, and this is my life in Israel. Very happy life, very interesting, ways of, celebrating in the streets, Chagim in the streets, Yom Ha'atzmaut, all open, and that one, and by the way, not from at all, you know. This all happened while I was living in the UK.
Thank you so much, Yaffa. It's been really interesting. If anybody wants to ask Yaffa any questions, if you can just unmute yourself.
Yes, Yaffa.
Yeah.
Hi, fascinating. Can you write it for the Shaw magazine as well? But also, what kibbutz were you put on? Did you go on to where you met Malcolm?
Right. It's called Beit Nir, and it was down south, but not very south. It's sort of halfway down between Tel Aviv and Beersheba, sort of in the middle. And what we did there, we were their main business was apricots, and the fruit was like groaning to come off the trees. And you know, I mean, I have family in Israel, in kibbutzim as well, so I knew, and also from school we used to send to be kibbutzim, you know. They used to call it national service, you know, not the army. There's a national service helping the state. We used to go, so they just gave us big aprons, and with a big space in front of you, you have to climb up on the tree and pick the apricots and eat them. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. Malcolm eating them, and Malcolm had the same thing. So we were doing the same sort of job, and then going and this is how it sort of the romance was going. Malcolm, when he was doing it, I don't remember, that happened before we arrived there, that they were told, you know, you can eat as many as you like while you're picking, and he was. And then then there are no toilets in the fields, you know. he had terrible tummy aches.
Not surprised.
And Malcolm absolutely refuses to put an apricot in his mouth till this day.
Oh, that's really funny, actually, because my parents also met on kibbutz, and my dad was working with the chickens, and he still will not eat chicken.
Yeah, you know what about chicken? Because they were a group of English boys and girls that we still keep in touch with, some of them, but none of them knew each other. None of them, because you have to go to through the Jewish agency as a volunteer. None of them knew each other. Amazing group of people, all city boys and girls. And one of their guys had the job with the chickens. The lul, as Malcolm says, he's back now. And he absolutely stank. Nobody, you know, you have like your dining room. You don't eat at home, you eat in the main dining room. Nobody wanted to sit next to him.
Oh boy.
Because they have like a lunch. Most of the jobs are like you finish at lunchtime, because you start working 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and because obviously the weather, and you start your day very, very early, and by lunchtime you're done. So they used to go straight from the field to have lunch, and then you had all the afternoons free, which was great, you know, for a group of youngsters, 17-year-old boys and girls. I was the only one that was making ice to the English boys, you know, to the other ones, because we had our own gorgeous boys as well. But Malcolm was older. He's 6 years older than me. So that's the story of the kibbutz.
Thank you.
Can I tell a little story?
Sure, we'd love to.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned the 1967 war. Now, our 5th anniversary was on the 10th of June, 1967. And
oh my God, that's my birthday.
Hitler on the roof with top hole. But sadly, by the time the 10th of June came, he'd flown back to Israel. So we saw the show, but without him. Oh. And it was very, very good, but we never got to see him.
Oh, wow, I see.
So I'll always remember that.
10th of June would have been my brother's birthday as well.
Oh.
Oh, really?
Who said that?
Lorraine.
Oh, Lorraine.
It's also Prince Philip's birthday, the 10th
I
of
know.
Correct.
He
That's
was
Prince
99.
He
Philip's
was
birthday. Yeah.
41 when we got married.
Ladies, I've got to go. Thank you very much. It was so
Lovely to see you,
interesting.
Sue.
Nice to see you,
Yes.
Sue.
Take care,
See
Sue.
you again.
And sorry again, girls. Sorry.
Bye.
That's all right.
Joanne.
Yaffa,
Yeah.
I agree,
When
that
you
was
go-
a lovely.
when you go back to Israel now,
Yeah.
is there something that you could say is the biggest difference for the kids there now than when you were, or the young people, more like the 17-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds? What do you think the biggest difference is for them? Is it community, or is it, what do you think it is?
No, I think they want very, very much to be like teenagers all over the world, most of them. Obviously there's the war situation, and the army situation makes them very different because they're all going in the army. And so, you know, they're still teenagers, but the ones that are like from 14 to 18, you know, before the army, all want to be, you know, like all, you know, teenagers everywhere. There was no this distinction that we had when I was there. You know, my sister-in-law, my brother's wife, was from the group that they were the youth movement. In fact, they are the scouts. The scout movement is very, very popular in Israel. Boys and girls are together. But there was about these types of movements, and the most of them were still, you know, as I said, the parents extremely, you know, sort of, this is a new land, we have to work the land, we have to love the country, we have to, you know, forego all of this, you know, and that's how we were, even though, you know, as I say, I also had these feelings that we just want to do Beatles music. That's about the first lot was Beatles, but nothing like the crazy that was here, you know, just we heard of the Beatles. But so that was probably the biggest difference. And also, like anywhere else, there is like rich families, very, very poor families, and depends who you are lucky to, you know, where you're lucky to be. You know, Tel Aviv kids, or, you know, Herzliya kids are extremely spoiled. They have everything that they want and everything that they need, and every tablets and whatever that is existing. And also what I see the difference is, which I believe it's sad, as I said before about education, that while they've got extremely good education, the difference between schools that are religious schools, I'm not talking about Haredi schools, right? Religious schools because they have actually separate type of schools where they emphasize more the religious education, much like the Jewish schools here, the religious education part of it, and the secular schools. As I said before, in every secular school, I was tested on my Bible. I was tested on, you know, and obviously Chagim. Everybody knows that's, you know, the whole country celebrates it. So Chagim is their history, but they don't learn enough of it in the secular schools. So, you know, normally Pesach, everybody has Seder night. Next day, everybody goes to the beach or doing other things or going on Tiyul, you know, up and down the country. That's the new Israel. You know, the secular, and sometimes it's like, don't throw the baby with the bathwater. You know, with the bathwater. No, sorry, Malcolm's correcting me, something that I know for sure is wrong. He said I should have said out of the water, but the actual thing, it's with the water.
We knew what you meant, it didn't matter.
Yeah. No, I think it's with, because it meaning that, you know, that you throw something that you don't want and you throw something good with it. That's the whole point. Anyway, so yeah, that is a difference, the difference.
So you kind of think that everybody was more equal when you were younger?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because we were all quite poor. Of course, there were the people that were there before the war. There were people there in Tel Aviv who, you know, there's always the people who are more established. I mean, I had an aunt, my mum, in fact, I had an aunt, my mum's sister, who left for Israel from this shtetl, very, very brave girl, because they made a shidduchim. She didn't like any of the boys that they made a shidduchim. She'd heard, obviously somehow the Zionist movement arrived there somehow, because my grandparents were totally not Zionistic. And she left to go to Israel in 1936. So when all the surviving brothers and sisters they arrived back, she was very established there, and she, you know, she helped, and I also call her my rich aunt, you know, they were very established. So of course, like in any society, there were rich people, but most, like in my classroom, kids in my class, we were all the same, all the same, you know, planning to be, you know, go to university, because there were such high hopes for all these parents about their children. And that's why I think pro rata, and again, you know, a Jewish brain, pro rata students in Israel, amount of students in university in Israel, compared to the amount of people in Israel, is probably the highest in the world. That still is the truth.
University, even when you were 17, that was women.
Oh,
Women
yes.
were encouraged.
Yeah, most definitely. If I did not marry, I was going to university. At that time, you know, it was always like complete equality between boys and girls. As I said, except for going to combat in the army, was not, you know, it was like very, very much fought for, you know, Ben Gurion and all of that. That women and men are exactly the same. They can do the same job. Well, you know, in the kibbutzim and all the stories from the early settlers, women did exactly the same as men. Not always earned them exactly the same, but exactly the same.
Anybody else got any questions?
Just quickly, I forgot. I skipped over the Yom Kippur War. I skipped over that. That was really awful time. Malcolm was in Israel. We were, you know, obviously we were married and we were living in Israel at the time. Sorry, I'm going mad. We were living in Israel at the time, but it was really a very, very, very difficult time, you know, until it all finished. It was something I'll never forget, particularly how it started in on Yom Kippur, because you have to imagine that on Yom Kippur, there's no radio, no TV, and everybody, you know, people, as much as they say no, not from and everything, most people have gone to shul. On Yom Kippur, they won't ever go to the beach, and there's no traffic on the road. No one is driving, you know. So it was like always this eerie quiet. And all of a sudden, you started hearing, turn the radio on. What? Why? And then started seeing people and started seeing cars going. The radio was needed because they were calling up the soldiers, the reserves. And they needed them to hear it. It was such a surprise, such an urgent thing. It was the most hardest thing in a memory of myself, you know, and my brother was called up. He heard you know, it's like a code word, isn't it? He got the code word, and Malcolm said, I'll take you. He wasn't, you know, he wasn't, what's it called? He wasn't in the army. And he said, I'll take you. And we always had to say goodbye to him and go. And again, it was a really, really, and don't forget, now, one thing is the communications with the kids, with the soldiers, is quite easy. You know, obviously they're very careful about if they take their phones where they are and what they're doing. I trust them to do the security, but they can phone their family very easily. then there were no phones, no mobile phones, no nothing. And for the long period of time, you don't know where your child is. And almost like in the World War II here, you know, until you had a knock on the door, God forbid, it was either them standing there or the, you know, the army standing there going to tell you an awful big piece of news. It was absolutely very, very hard. But that day was an extremely, you know, memorable day for us. We were all very young, had, you know, babies, kids, and yeah. Anyway, I just remembered that I wanted to add that.
Can I just ask you about your parents?
Yes.
How difficult was it for them to become established within the community, because they came on a boat?
No, they didn't come on a boat that time, because they arrived into the Independence War in the end. You know, literally in 40 just, you know, the war was just finished. You know, I think Israel, the state was just declared, so they came in legally afterwards. So again, Claire, they were so similar to so many other people. And when they were being settled, the people that were on the Exodus were promised, again, it's a long story, which is, I was going to tell that on Yom HaShoah, because it's sort of an angle of survival and of that about the Exodus, which is a very unique story for them. They were being promised, you know, because of their suffering from the Haganah people, wait, don't give in to the British. They were being shouted out with megaphones, don't give in, because the British wanted them to get off in Cyprus, they refused. They wanted them to get off in France, they refused. And they said, if you don't, you know, we will make sure that when you do get to Israel, we will look after you. We will give you a priority. And they actually did. So eventually when they got to Israel, in Jaffa, where we lived first, the whole street practically were people of the same ilk, you know? So that was quite easy for them to settle there. A lot, you know, a lot easier in that respect than a lot of other people that arrived there.
And spoke Yiddish?
Yes, because my father spoke Ivrit. My father came, as I said, from a very Zionist family, and Ivrit, my grandfather made him go to, apart from, he always used to tell me and us and my children, he said, in Poland, I went first to Cheder before school, then to a Polish school, and then after the Polish school, he went to a Hebrew school to learn Hebrew and literature and history of Israel and Zionism. So so he spoke Yiddish, but my mum didn't. So their language was Yiddish, yeah. And that's why I speak Yiddish, because even though we arrived in Israel and my mum learned Hebrew and everything, every time they wanted to say something that we would understand, they'd speak in Yiddish. And I understand most words in Yiddish. I can even speak to a fashion. I love it now. I hated it when they spoke in Yiddish.
Yaffa,
Yeah.
you're just reminding me that my mum was Ashkenazi and my dad was Sephardi.
Right.
And my mum spoke fluent Yiddish because my grandparents also came from Poland to England, and their family behind, who unfortunately perished in the Holocaust, with only 3 survivors in my family.
Yeah.
And when my parents didn't want my brother and myself to understand what they were talking about, they spoke in Yiddish. My mum taught my Sephardi father how to speak Yiddish. But as you said, you listen to them and then you pick up the words and then you start to understand what they're talking about.
Exactly.
And I think it's a shame that we haven't got maybe a group going to try and keep that language going, because it's such a unique language. It's a lovely language. I remember that when my mum's cousin came from Israel to see my mum, and she couldn't speak English and my mum couldn't speak Hebrew, and they connected with Yiddish.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, there is, Lorraine, the Sinclair House, when they were running on a Sunday morning, I think, a Yiddish group.
Yeah, is that's Sonia Black?
I don't know. I never went, but I know that, you know, Rita Rubin used to go, because when she found out that I can speak Yiddish, I understand, certainly. She used to say, why don't you come to the Yiddish group, you know?
Yeah, no, I know it was running, but over the years my Yiddish has become quite rusty, and I felt if I went I might be quite embarrassed by really not understanding as much as what I think I do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, I was working for many years in Stamford Hill in Tottenham, and it came in very, very handy there, I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I rather think that most of us grew up with parents that spoke Yiddish because they didn't want us to understand, but we did get to understand, and I'm not going to go into it now, but growing up, if you never let on that you understood, it was amazing what you learned. But I think, if I'm correct, Sonia Black does or did do classes, but she wouldn't take people who couldn't actually speak properly. She didn't want to teach people how to speak Yiddish. She wanted you to be able to sit and converse. I know, because I wanted to go, because like I think most of us around, we grew up with it. You know, our grandparents and our parents, and mostly because when we were little, they didn't want you to know what they were talking about, but then you learn. That's how you learn.
Yeah, definitely.
Yaffa, can I just say thank you very much for this, because it's been amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's very, very interesting. And yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Yaffa. We can only see your hair.
Ah, sorry.
Has anybody else got any questions? No?
Is it Yaffa? Is it somebody else's birthday today?
Yes, Malcolm's.
How are you celebrating?
Well, he had his cards. He had FaceTime from Australia. He had the kids from Loughton coming here with a banner saying happy birthday, and actually came into the garden and played a bit of cricket in the garden. And then I bought him I had in here prepared, I didn't make it, a pizza, which it's not something I'd make for him because it's not something he should have. and then, as I say, a lot of phone calls and actually quite a few cards, which surprised me. So the best he could.
Great.
Good.
Yeah.
I wish him a happy birthday from me.
Please wish him happy birthday from all of us.
Shall we have do you want the ladies' choir to sing him a happy birthday?
he's already on another call, another happy birthday. He's a happy boy.
I was going to say no one deserves that.
Thank you very much, Yaffa. It was really fascinating.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'd love to listen to other stories. Thanks.
Does anyone, before we finish, does anyone want to talk about their cheesecakes that they've made? I think you've made one, Yaffa, a nice one.
Oh,
I did, but it's not as good as yours, I'm sure. I don't know what I did wrong.
Why? What's wrong?
It's it took longer than the 25 minutes in the oven, and I probably had, there was too much moisture in it. I don't know. Listen, it's like an ice cream. It's delicious, but I can't slice it.
Put it in the freezer for a little while.
I'll put it in the freezer, see how that works.
You need to, when you put the raspberries in,
you
need to dry them first.
Yeah, I tried to do that, but I think, I think that may be the reason. And also, I kept thinking, was there no eggs, no flour, nothing?
No.
So I'm thinking, what is holding it together?
It just does, but I think because the raspberries were probably a bit too wet.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. So I'm sure it'll get eaten because the kids were eating it, Leo particularly, because they thought it was more like an ice cream than a cake, but it's very nice.
Good. Well done.
I'm going to try and make another one tomorrow. I just got, you know, I've got cheese and sour cream and biscuits, so I'm going to try and make that.
Lovely.
Like another baked one. That's it. I got to go because I got to start thinking what we're having for dinner. He had his pizza for lunch.
Ah.
We got pizza for dinner.
Can I suggest food?